In this introduction to performance metrics, we're going to briefly consider what they are, and then to outline some of the types of performance metrics that we will delve into in more detail. Performance metrics, they provide us with a way of measuring, be it the effectiveness, the efficiency, the learnability, or other sort of measurable characteristics of how users engage with and complete tasks. We can use them not only to measure task success, but also to identify where there may be issues around usability, and then to narrow down in terms of how we actually try to fix those. All of the metrics that we're going to be looking at, they are going to be derived, measured from observable actions or outputs that arise from user behavior as they do one or more tasks. So fundamentally, these are applied metrics. We get the users to do something and we measure then aspects of what they have done. There are some limitations to performance metrics that we usefully should think about up front. Importantly, because we're dealing with a small sample of total population of our users, all of the information we looked at in terms of our stats, content, the need to include confidence intervals, the need to make sure we are expressing our findings with a suitable confidence level, all of these absolutely apply to the data that we will collect through our performance measurement metrics. We do need an adequate sample size. If we don't have an adequate sample size, it's going to be really hard to say with any level of confidence that we have observed findings. Generally speaking, if we've got a sample size of sort of 10 or more, we're probably okay. We're often able in those cases to indicate where there are clear findings with a reasonably solid degree of confidence. One of the key things to understand here is that whilst we will measure aspects around performance and we may identify areas where performance is not as good as we would like it to be, this does not mean that we've identified the reason why performance is low. And quite often then we have to delve into that in more detail to understand, well, what were the reasons that cause performance to be low? And in the section after looking at performance metrics, when we go on to have a look at self-reported metrics, we'll look at how we can maybe collect more qualitative information from the user, and sometimes that helps provide a useful insight into the reasons why we may have observed a limitation in terms of our performance. For the performance metrics that we will look at inside this section, you can see them listed here on the screen. So there's going to be 5 different categories that we will explore. All of them actually quite straightforward. The first one's task success. That's simply measuring if our users can complete a given task. The next one is time on task, and that's going beyond it to then measure, well, how long did it take users to complete a particular task or until they gave up. Errors is the next aspect after that, is where we measure or quantify or classify the number of errors that a user makes when completing a particular task. Efficiency, and we'll look at different ways we can measure that, but that's getting into metrics or ways of measuring the amount of effort that it took the user to complete a particular task. And generally speaking, we want to make things as efficient as possible and minimize the amount of effort that the user needs to complete their tasks. And the final section is learnability. A really important one given the expectations that are placed in software today. It's going to look at changes over time in terms of how quickly a user learns how to use a particular application or to perform a particular task. So that's all the things we want to look at in this. In the next section, we're going to go on to have a look at task success and time on task as our first 2 performance metrics.